Hello and welcome to another episode of S1ap on Location, where today we take a look at a long-forgotten short track in South Bend, Indiana that nonetheless played a pivotal part in early auto racing and even helped NASCAR get a toehold in the Midwest in the 1950s, Playland Park Speedway. Hey, this is S1ap on Location, and this is what remains of Playland Park Speedway out here in South Bend, Indiana. This place right here used to be a park, just a simple park right next to the St. Joseph River back in the 1880s. But eventually this place morphed into a racetrack that held a NASCAR Cup Series race in 1952. Tim Flock from Georgia ended up winning that race. He beat Lee Petty by about 3/4 of a lap. This was a simple half-mile dirt track. Originally began its life as a horse racing track, and this curiously named track began its life really in 1925. The Northern Indiana Railroad Company came in here, bought this place out, and they immediately started putting in amusement park rides. They put in a big roller coaster called the Jackrabbit, well, big for the time anyway. They had a massive swimming pool out here. They could have like 1,100 people in it. They had pool houses, had early arcades that were, wasn't like video games or anything. It was the 1920s. They had analog pinball machines and plinko machines and that type of stuff. They had a whole casino. They had gambling halls, dance halls and all that. But when you have a casino, you have to have a horse racing track so you can bet on horses. And that was how the racetrack got out here. Now, pretty much as soon as this place was built, they started having motor auto races out here as soon as they could. That was the big craze going into the 20s. Pretty much most of the people in America had a car at that point, and everybody wanted to see how fast they could go. The Indy 500 had been around for over a decade at that point, and being in Indiana, they wanted to watch IndyCar races wherever they could. The AAA held races out here. NASCAR held a few races. I wouldn't be surprised if the USAC got involved out here while they still could. A lot of those records, as old as this place is, just kind of got lost to time. But the NASCAR race out here was really an initial push by NASCAR to try to get into the Midwestern market. That had been IndyCar's thing for just a few decades. They weren't really established in this area like they are today. And NASCAR had made pushes out into Road America. In the 1950s, they were doing races in Ohio, Michigan, at the Michigan State Fairgrounds, really wherever they could. But that push really never took. They ended up shrinking back towards the south. Remember, they had another big push in the southwest going out to races in Oklahoma that didn't quite pan out. So NASCAR, after the 1950s, kind of restricted and doubled down on the south, and it ended up paying off for them. And now we have this sort of Midwest swing these days where we got the Xfinity Series going out to mid-Ohio. We have the Road America race. We have possibly, there's a lot of rumors of Chicago Speedway coming back. Of course, we have Kansas Speedway. We have the Chicago Street Race coming down the pipe. So this track kind of was the where all of this sort of Midwestern push came from. This was something NASCAR tried to do. It didn't work out in the 50s, but now in the 2010s and 2020s, we're trying to make that push again. It seems to be working. We're getting a lot of buzz with that Chicago Street Race, and like 120,000 people at Road America both years. So yeah, this is, for all intents and purposes, kind of where all that started right here. They held all sorts of races out here for the entire duration of Playland Park Speedway, which, by the way, is not to be confused with Playland Park in Grimes, Iowa, or Houston, Texas. It was really tough to find information on this place because it would always get mixed up with them, but thankfully I was able to find a number of articles with the South Bend Tribune, and they were a great resource for me. But what they were missing was any mention of night races or anything. Thought maybe they always held races during the day. Night races would have been a pretty new endeavor, but it seems like out here they had light poles out here that ended up getting chopped down for night races. It would have been pretty normal to have them placed in front of the grandstands, because that way, the primitive incandescent lighting of the 1950s, you want the lights physically as close to the track as possible. That way they can be as bright as possible. But yeah, it kind of makes sense to have midget car races, sprint car races here at night. That way it allows for the rest of the venue to generate money during the day, and then you can have a race at night. And this isn't really a residential area back then, or really now. Nowadays it's student housing for the University of Indiana at South Bend, a little place called River Crossing out here on Titan Drive. But this place shut down in 1961 as people's interests kind of migrated to different things in the 60s, and things kind of more or less got modernized to what they are today. People's interests changed, and amusement parks, not just in Indiana, but all over America, started to wither away and change into different things and try to morph into things that could more cater to people of the current day back then. And this place in 1962 ended up becoming a golf course. By the time the 1970s rolled around, that wasn't making them any money either, so this place basically just was more or less abandoned, and eventually the University of Indiana bought this place for student housing. All right, so when I was doing my research for this place, I just couldn't believe that they still had the grandstands up. As old as this track was, being in the 1950s and being closed down in the 1960s, why on earth, that when they built all the student housing, why leave all this here? We had to clear out basically everything else. There were still a few buildings left over from its days as an amusement park, and well, why just leave this here? And when I actually physically got here, there's a Dairy Queen on the other side of it. Me and my camera guy, Cody Hicken, we went to that Dairy Queen, and our original plan was to sneak in from the top and come down the stairs and get inside the grandstands for you. But you can't. There's a fence all the way around it. I guess they didn't want people hurting themselves, but these grandstands basically act as like a berm, a reinforced berm to stop the ground from eroding where all those businesses are up there. There's Dairy Queen, Arby's, a few other businesses, small businesses up there. And they probably just said, hey, this concrete is nice and solid. It's a nice backer. It makes sure that none of this stuff erodes and we don't have to go and maintain it anymore. So let's just put up some fencing so people don't, get themselves killed by running up and down the stairs and, breaking a leg or breaking a neck, and just leave it as it is. So it is really cool that all this is still here, but honestly, I don't think anybody in this area even knows what this was for. It might have known there was an amusement park here, and it might have known that Playland Park was here, but I seriously doubt anybody in this area even knows that this was the site of a NASCAR Cup race back in the 1950s. So I'm really excited this place is here. I mean, when we were driving down here, me and Cody were talking to each other like, what are the odds that they just got rid of it, during the last Earth scan by Google or whoever. But it's still here. We're really excited to see it here and see it in person. And it only played one note in this great big symphony we call NASCAR, but like Air Base Speedway and so many others, it deserves to be remembered because this is kind of where it all began for a lot of very early NASCAR fans and a lot of early NASCAR stars. Playland Park Speedway was instrumental in the success of early auto racing. Not only did it play host to some of the events held in the primordial age of American motorsports, but it was also a massive draw in that it enticed people to come to these early races in the first place. It offered amenities that were unheard of for the time that we now take for granted. Casinos on the property, betting programs, amusement rides for kids and adults alike. In that respect, it was a century ahead of its time. Sadly, all that remains are the grandstands, now used as a bulwark to hold up the modern highways crisscrossing Indiana. Something old being the foundation for something new. Oddly fitting, isn't it? Before I go, I want to give a big shout out to Cody Hicken, who filmed this episode and picked me up at the Chicago airport and ferried me and Davin Cornelius to Road America for the most fun you can possibly have at a racetrack. You can check out both of their channels in the description down below. And as always, big thanks to my patrons. S1ap on Location is entirely funded by Patreon. If you like what you just saw, consider supporting me there. Anyway, I'm Slapshoes, thanks for watching, and until next time, y'all take it easy.